to the garden. Today I'm going to be covering my top 5 uses for compost. The first and most common way that I use compost is just by top dressing the garden. This is really great for pots that are already planted, and it'll give those plants a little boost. We're adding some nutrients, beneficial bacteria, and beneficial insects too. This also introduces worms into the garden, so that'll improve the soil over time. So the more you do this, the better your soil will be. And I really love the way this looks. That rich, black compost is such a beautiful contrast to these bright green vegetables. This works really well for larger plants too, like peppers, tomatoes, and cucumbers. They usually get really hungry around late summer, so this is a great fertilizer. Our next method actually requires an empty container. So this is best done in spring or in autumn, right before you start planting. And this is just mixing it in with your soil. It's going to be most effective on the first 3 or 4 inches of the soil. Just lighten everything up. This is definitely more effective than top dressing, but top dressing can be done any time of year, whereas this really requires an empty pot. But now this is ready to plant. It's nice and loose, so our seedlings will have no trouble driving their roots down deep. So I'm going to sprinkle on some spinach seeds here, some peas, and just a few carrots as well. And we can either mix these in with our soil, or we can go back to our first method and top dress with our compost. So I'm going to bury these about 1 centimeter deep with our rich, beautiful compost. This is actually called the no-dig method. So we're not actually burying the seeds under the soil. We've just sprinkled them on top and then covered them with our compost. So we've used our compost to top dress and mixed it into the first few inches. Now we're going to mix it in all the way throughout the container. So I'm going to start this one from scratch. So I've got an empty pot. I usually like to start out with some dried leaves. That's just a little filler at the bottom. It also provides a little nutrients later on as those break down, and it creates leaf mold. Then we're going to add a whole bunch of compost, but we want to cut this with a little bit of native soil or potting soil. You could grow in 100% compost, but this is so rich that it's actually going to go a lot further if we mix it in with native soil. My native soil is really clay rich and dense, so this is a really great way to lighten that up and really improve it quickly. We're just going to start this container off with perfect soil just by mixing it 50-50 with compost and our native soil. So we'll start by just layering it all in, but then we want to mix it all together really nicely. That way we don't have any dry pockets or clay-rich, dense areas. It's all going to be fluffy and really well mixed. Just look at how light this is. And just like that, we've got a brand new container. And this is how I started basically my entire garden. The fourth way I like to use compost is by bringing it indoors for my houseplants. Now this can't go directly inside as is. We actually have to sterilize it first. But there are several ways that you can do this. I just like to bring it up to a boil. So we're going to heat this up just to kill any insects that are in here, any eggs. It also clears out any seeds that could potentially sprout. So this is a little unconventional. It's a little bit more work, but I think it's worth it to give us some nice organic fertilizer for our indoor plants. We can mix this in with some potting soil. You just want to use less. Because of all those nutrients, this can actually grow mold and fungus on your indoor containers. So in a pot this size, I would probably only use maybe a heaping handful of compost, and the rest we can just use potting soil. But this is a great way to reinvigorate old potting soil. And you want to boil this for at least 30 minutes. So this is best to do outdoors because it can actually smell a little bit. You can actually add just a couple handfuls in a pot like this and brew a compost tea. You can boil it and extract those nutrients as you sterilize it for indoor use. Which brings us to our fifth and final use for compost. Compost tea is probably the most versatile way to use compost because we can water in our new seeds, young seedlings, and fully grown plants. This pepper is actually a little thirsty, so we're going to give it a drink and fertilize it at the same time. I'm using sifted compost. So as long as the nozzle on your watering can is larger than the holes on your sifter, then the compost should flow right through it. But we don't actually use that much. A watering can this size, which is only a couple gallons, we're just gonna add about a heaping handful. Then we can stir this up a bit, mix it in. You can even let it sit overnight if you have time. And then this will make just a beautifully rich compost tea. So we're gonna have a happy jalapeno. And then the rest of this can actually brew a nice big batch in this bucket. So we're gonna mix this all up, stir it every now and then, every couple hours maybe. Then we're gonna let this sit overnight so all those nutrients dissolve into the water and we end up with a beautifully rich, organic liquid fertilizer. This is really great for watering in containers. It just is really quick, really simple. It's great for heavy feeders like cucumbers and tomatoes. And the best part about this is that we made that compost ourselves. So this is homemade, organic. You'll even see if you have yellowing leaves, they'll turn dark green like this after you add the fertilizer. So it's a really great way to feed your plants. So those are my top 5 uses for compost. I hope you give this a go in your garden. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.